Hey guys, tonight we're plunging into the blood-soaked origins of World War II, a cataclysm that clawed its way from the rotting corpse of the first global slaughter, devouring 70 million souls in a whirlwind of steel and screams, where one punitive treaty twisted into a blueprint for apocalypse, and a failed painter's venomous brushstrokes painted the skies with fire. Did you know that the Treaty of Versailles, etched in the opulent halls of a French palace, didn't just humble Germany, but crushed its spirit so thoroughly that wheelbarrows of worthless cash became playground toys for starving children? Or that Mussolini's black shirts marched to power, promising Roman glory, while Stalin erased his rivals from photos as if they were mere smudges on a lens? And what if the world's weary leaders, drunk on the illusion of never again, had slammed the door on rising tyrants instead of cracking it open with appeasement, letting hatred fester like an untreated wound in the body politic? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this sleepy little time machine reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the fog-choked avenues of a battered Berlin in 1919, your boots sinking into puddles that mirror the shattered skyline like fractured memories. The sharp tang of lingering cordite biting at your nostrils, while rain patters down like indifferent applause on the ruins of a world that promised peace but delivered only echoes of artillery thunder. Your coat, threadbare and heavy with damp, clings to your shoulders as you pass haggard figures huddled in doorways, their eyes hollow from the Great War's insatiable hunger that swallowed fathers into trench graves and spat back sons with limbs mangled or minds fractured. And you feel the chill seep into your bones, a cold that's more than weather. It's the frost of betrayal settling over a continent bled dry. You clutch a crumpled leaflet proclaiming the armistice, its ink running like tears. But as you scan the weary faces around you, you sense the fragile truce cracking underfoot, much like how today's endless scrolling through bad news feeds a similar unease, worse than doom scrolling through conspiracy threads at 3 a.m., when sleep evades you like a guilty secret. Historians still debate whether the Treaty of Versailles was a vengeful sledgehammer forged in French resentment or a well-intentioned bandage too tight to heal. But as you approach the Grand Palace near Paris, where leaders convene in 1919, you overhear Wilson preaching his 14 points like a starry-eyed prophet, Clemenceau snarling for reparations to cripple the Hun eternally, and Lloyd George navigating the political minefield with pragmatic whispers, all while ignoring the human wreckage piling up like discarded shells. You watch them redraw maps with cavalier strokes, slicing German territory Alsace-Lorraine to France, colonies scattered like crumbs and capping the army at a laughable 100,000 men. No tanks rumbling like thunder gods, no submarines lurking in shadowy depths, no air force to claim the skies, forcing Germany to shoulder full blame for the war's carnage, a national humiliation that burns in your chest like swallowed embers. Your stomach growls as you pass a bakery with empty shelves, where bakers once kneaded dough but now scrape together loaves from sawdust and regret. And you recall the absurd tidbit that some Germans inflated pig bladders into makeshift rafts for smuggling food across rivers, a desperate ingenuity born from hyperinflation that turned million-mark bills into wallpaper or kindling, farcical, yet tragic like using monopoly money to pay real rent in a crashing economy. The metallic bite on your tongue evolves from battlefield rust to the sour aftertaste of worthless currency, a recurring motif that threads through the despair like veins in marble, pulsing with the quiet rage of a people betrayed by their own defeat. You zoom out for a breath, seeing Europe as a fractured mosaic where each shard glints with unresolved grudges. The Versailles architects unwittingly laying the foundation for a darker edifice, their signatures drying like blood on parchment while families across the Rhine starve in silence. Children playing hopscotch on sidewalks cracked by economic quakes. In Italy, you feel the pull southward as Mussolini's nationalists swell like a storm cloud, black shirts parading with fists clenched, promising to resurrect Rome's eagles from the ashes of betrayal, their marches echoing through cobbled plazas where veterans feel cheated of promised lands, and you ponder the irony that a former socialist like Il Duce could flip to fascism faster than a politician dodging scandal today. Your skin prickles with the injustice crawling like invisible lice. The way ordinary folk, numb from post-war poverty, begin nodding to his calls for order and pride, much like how viral TikToks today rally crowds to fleeting causes without questioning the undercurrents. As you cross into Russia's frozen expanse in your mind's eye, the chill deepens into bone-aching frost, where Stalin's shadow lengthens over blood-soaked snow, his purges claiming comrades like weeds pulled from a garden, villages starving under collectivization while factories rise on skeletal labor, and historians argue whether his paranoia was a product of revolutionary zeal or a mirror of the Tsars he overthrew, a debate that feels eternal like the Siberian winds. You taste the iron again, now mingled with the gritty ash of burned villages, a sensory echo mutating from Western despair to Eastern terror, reminding you that totalitarianism wears many masks but always demands blind loyalty. In Japan, ambition stirs like a coiled serpent. Their 1931 invasion of Manchuria met with League of Nations scoldings as toothless as a grandparent's lecture. Renaming the puppet state Manchukuo in a brazen rebrand that fools no one, akin to slapping a fresh label on expired goods and calling it gourmet, your footsteps quicken through the fog, heart pounding with the premonition of gathering storms, as Asia's rich resources tempt militarists who modernize their islands only to hunger for empire, their disregard for international pleas foreshadowing the indifference that will let flames spread unchecked. Back in Germany, you stumble upon rallies where Hitler's voice cracks like thunder over crowds desperate for scapegoats, his Austrian accent weaving tales of stabbed-in-the-back betrayal, promising jobs and glory while blaming Jews, communists, and liberals for every ill, and you feel the sarcasm bubble up how a rejected art student could rally a nation more effectively than today's influencers peddling self-help scams. The fog thickens around you, blurring edges between hope and horror. The swastikas unfurl like venomous banners, the crowd's fervour drowning out whispers of doubt, and in a shocking twist, you learn that early on, some Germans fashioned kites from hyperinflated banknotes, a whimsical defiance against the economic abyss that masks the rising tide of resentment. Your breath fogs the air, carrying the metallic tang now laced with the acrid smoke of burning books, a motif twisting like smoke signals warning of the intellectual purge to come, and you zoom out once more, viewing the continent as a powder keg with fuses lit from multiple ends, Versailles resentments, economic craters, ideological fires all converging toward an explosion that will engulf the globe. In Spain's civil war shadows, you glimpse the rehearsal, Guernica's skies raining death from German planes testing their wings, civilians fleeing flames that scorch your imagined skin. The world's horrified but idle gaze, a prelude to appeasement's fatal flaw. Historians still wrangle over whether Franco's victory emboldened Hitler, or if the League's impotence was the real catalyst. A debate as endless as the Iberian sunsets now stained with blood. Your coat weighs heavier, wool sodden with the damp of impending doom, and in ironic reflection, you think how this era's blind spots feel like scrolling past red flags on a dating app, ignoring the warnings until it's too late. As you turn a corner into a square where far-right groups promise order amid chaos, the chill settles deeper, a psychological shudder that whispers of storms brewing beyond the horizon, leaving you stranded in the fog, heart racing, questioning if anyone will pierce the veil before the thunder breaks and consumes all in its path. You push forward through the thickening mist that coils around your ankles like spectral serpents, the damp air now carrying a sharper edge, laced with the faint, acrid whiff of burning paper from distant bonfires where forbidden books curl into ash, and your skin prickles as if invisible eyes watch from the shadows, judging your every step in this labyrinth of rising dread. Your coat, heavier with the weight of unspoken warnings, brushes against a poster plastered on a crumbling wall, its bold letters screaming strength through unity, while a stylized eagle clutches a swastika like a talisman against the chaos. And you feel the irony twist in your gut, how a symbol meant for luck in ancient times now heralds misfortune for millions, much like how today's viral memes can flip from harmless fun to divisive poison overnight. The fog mutates around you, its tendrils shifting from the metallic tang of economic rust to the smoky bite of ideological fires, a sensory evolution that whispers of transformations yet to come, pulling you deeper into the heart of Germany's fermenting rage. You stumble upon a beer hall in Munich, the air thick with the yeasty scent of stale ale and unwashed bodies, where a mustachioed man with wild eyes climbs onto a table, his voice cracking like a whip as he rails against the stab in the back that lost the war, promising to tear down the Versailles shackles and rebuild a master race. And historians still debate whether Adolf Hitler's failed 1923 putsch was a clownish fiasco or the spark that ignited the inferno, his prison time birthing Mein Kampf like a venomous egg hatching in the dark. Your hands clench involuntarily, nails digging into palms as you listen to the crowd's murmurs swell into cheers, their desperation moulding into fanaticism faster than dough rising in a hot oven, and in a zoom-out breath, you see the nation as a pressure cooker with the lid rattling, economic despair and national humiliation fueling a steam that will soon explode across borders. The chill in your bones deepens, now a gnawing ache that spreads like frostbite through veins, reminding you of the pig bladders inflated into desperate rafts on swollen rivers. But here in the hall, desperation takes a darker form, men joining the Nazi Party not for ideology alone, but for the promise of bread and purpose. A tidbit of absurdity in how stormtroopers fashioned uniforms from scavenged cloth, patching together terror from rags. You slip out into the night, the fog enveloping you like a shroud, carrying whispers of Mussolini's march on Rome in 1922, where black shirts stormed the capital, not with guns blazing, but with threats and theatrics. King Victor Emmanuel III caving like a house of cards, installing Il Duce as prime minister and birthing fascism's blueprint total loyalty, suppressed speech, glorified violence, much like how modern autocrats cloak censorship in national security jargon, fooling the masses with shiny distractions. Your breath fogs the air, mingling with the distant clamour of Italian streets where workers once unionised now march in lockstep, their fists raised in Roman salutes that echo ancient emperors but reek of fresh tyranny. And you ponder the academic uncertainty over whether Mussolini's Ethiopia invasion in 1935, with poison gas raining on villages like hellish confetti, was a colonial footnote or a dress rehearsal for global aggression, the League's toothless sanctions dissolving like sugar in rain. The metallic tang on your tongue sharpens again, now infused with the bitter aftertaste of mustard gas lingering from World War I's ghosts, a motif twisting through the narrative like barbed wire, ensnaring hopes of peace in its coils. In Russia, the fog parts briefly to reveal frozen gulags where Stalin's paranoia blooms like deadly nightshade, his show trials executing old Bolsheviks on fabricated charges, villages collectivized into starvation machines that claim millions in the Holodomor, and you feel the empathy well up for Ukrainian farmers clutching empty bowls, their ribs protruding like accusations against the regime, historians arguing if this engineered famine was genocide or mere collateral in the march toward industrialization, a debate as cold as Siberian exile. Your coat clings tighter, wool sodden with the phantom snow of purges, where neighbors denounce each other for whispers of dissent, children taught to spy on parents in schools that double as indoctrination mills, and in sarcastic aside, you muse that Stalin's cult of personality makes today's influencer worship look like amateur hour. His face plastered on every wall like a bad wallpaper choice that won't peel off. You zoom out for a poetic exhale, viewing the Soviet expanse as a vast chessboard where pawns are sacrificed without remorse, the king's shadow lengthening over Europe as non-aggression packs mask invasion plans, the chill settling into your marrow like an unyielding frost that numbs but never kills the spark of resistance buried deep. Across the Pacific, the fog shifts to humid mists over Tokyo's bustling harbours, where militarists in crisp uniforms plot expansion like gamblers eyeing a weak hand, their 1931 Manchuria grab ignored by the world, puppet emperor installed in a farce of sovereignty, and you taste the irony in how Japan's greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere promised liberation from Western colonialism while chaining Asia in new irons, much like corporate rebrands that swap exploitation for ethical sourcing slogans. Your skin crawls with the injustice of Nanking's horrors. In 1937, civilians massacred in streets slick with blood, a tidbit of the absurd in soldiers competing to behead the most victims like a macabre game show, and academics still wrangle over the death toll 200,000 or 300,000 a numbers game that can't quantify the soul-crushing terror. The sensory thread evolves once more, the metallic bite now salted with ocean spray from Japanese warships slicing through waves, foreshadowing Pearl Harbor's thunder, as you feel the global web tightening, threads of ambition pulling taut from Berlin to Rome to Tokyo, alliances forging in the Axis Pact like a devil's bargain sealed in ink and ambition. In Spain, the fog clears to reveal Guernica's rubble, Picasso's painting not yet born, but the screams eternal. German bombers testing tactics on innocence. The world's outrage flickering like a candle in wind before snuffing out under appeasement's blanket. And you ponder if Chamberlain's Peace for Our Time after Munich in 1938 was naive optimism or willful blindness, handing Czechoslovakia to Hitler like a sacrificial lamb, the chill racing up your spine as tanks roll unopposed. Your breath quickens, heart hammering against ribs like a prisoner in a cell, the fog pressing closer with whispers of Anschluss in Austria, crowds cheering unification while freedoms dissolve, and in a modern parallel, you think how echo chambers today amplify division faster than radio broadcast did then, turning neighbours into suspects overnight. The absurdity strikes again. Some Czechs fashioned hidden radios from household junk to listen to BBC whispers of hope, a defiant spark in the gathering dark. As you navigate the mist-shrouded path, the metallic tang lingers, now laced with the ozone of impending lightning, a motif crackling with energy as Europe's fault lines groan under pressure, leaving you adrift in the haze, pulse racing, eyes straining for the first flash that will ignite the powder keg and engulf the world in flames you can already smell on the wind. You feel the first flicker of that dreaded flame lick at your heels as the fog swirls into a vortex of half-formed shadows, pulling you across the choppy English Channel toward London's smog-choked spires, where politicians sip tea in wood-panelled rooms, their fingers stained with ink from treaties that feel more like suicide notes than safeguards. And the damp air now carries a brackish tang of salt water, mingled with the faint rot of Thames mud, evolving the metallic bite into something saltier, more insidious, like tears shed over maps redrawn in haste. Your coat flaps wildly in the wind, whipping off the Dover cliffs, where white chalk crumbles underfoot like brittle bones, and you overhear Neville Chamberlain's voice crackling through a wireless set in a nearby pub, assuring the nation that Hitler's appetite for land is sated after swallowing Czechoslovakia whole. His infamous Peace for Our Time proclamation waving like a white flag from Munich in 1938. But you sense the sarcasm bubbling up, how a piece of paper signed in desperation feels like handing a pyromaniac a matchbox and hoping he won't burn the house down. Worse than trusting a spam email promising riches without strings attached. The chill races up your spine now, mutating from bone-deep frost to a prickling sweat that beads on your forehead despite the blustery gale. As if your body knows what the politicians deny, that appeasement isn't diplomacy, but delay, buying time with other nations' blood while the storm gathers force across the Rhine. You zoom out for a poetic breath, viewing the continent as a vast chessboard where pawns like Austria and the Sudetenland are sacrificed without a second thought. The kings in their castles oblivious to the rooks advancing unchecked, and in that widened gaze, you glimpse the academic debate raging among historians. Was Chamberlain's policy a pragmatic bid to rearm Britain, or a cowardly capitulation that emboldened Hitler, feeding his megalomania like steroids to a bully? A question that echoes through time like unanswered echoes in empty halls. Your hands tremble as you clutch a newspaper headline screaming Anschluss, from earlier that year, Austria annexed without a shot fired. Crowds cheering in Vienna as if welcoming a long-lost brother rather than a conqueror in wolf's clothing. And you ponder the absurd tidbit that some Austrians fashioned homemade flags from bedsheets to wave in forced jubilation, a frantic camouflage of loyalty to hide their terror, much like how people today plaster fake smiles on social media to mask inner turmoil amid viral outrage storms. The fog thickens again, now laced with the acrid smoke of distant Spanish bombs, where the Civil War's embers still glow in Guernica's ruins. Picasso's canvas not yet dry, but already screaming the horrors of aerial terror tested on innocence. And you feel the empathy swell for Basque villagers clutching children amid falling plaster, their screams drowned by Heinkel engines, a preview of the blitz to come that the world dismissed as someone else's problem. Akin to scrolling past climate disaster posts while sipping lattes in air-conditioned comfort, your skin crawls with the injustice of it all. The way League of Nations resolutions flutter uselessly like autumn leaves in a gale. Ethiopia's pleas ignored after Mussolini's gas attacks in 1935 turned villages into choking graveyards, and historians wrangle over whether this aggression was the first domino or if the real culprit was the West's isolationism, a fatigue from World War I that left doors ajar for tyrants to stroll through unchallenged. The metallic tang sharpens on your tongue once more, now infused with the bitter zest of mustard gas residues haunting Italian battlefields, a motif curling like poison ivy through the narrative, strangling hopes of disarmament in its vines as arms races accelerate in shadowy factories. You push onward through the mist toward Moscow's onion-domed silhouettes, where Stalin's gaze pierces the gloom like searchlights on a prison wall. His non-aggression pact with Hitler in 1939, a devil's handshake that carves up Poland like a roast at a sinister feast, and you shiver at the irony two ideological foes clasping hands over secret maps, dividing spheres of influence while the world gasps in disbelief, much like rival tech giants today merging behind closed doors to monopolize markets under the guise of partnership. Your breath comes in ragged bursts, the chill mutating into a clammy grip around your throat as whispers of Soviet purges echo from the gulags, where millions vanish into Siberian voids on trumped-up charges. Families shattered like glass under boots, and in a moment of deep empathy, you ache for the mothers clutching faded photos of disappeared sons, their grief a silent scream against the regime's iron curtain of lies. The fog parts briefly over Tokyo's lantern-lit alleys, where militarists in starched uniforms plot Manchuria's 1931 seizure with maps unrolled like scrolls of conquest. The League's condemnation as effective as a stern letter to a hurricane, and you taste the absurdity in how Japanese soldiers sometimes fashion bayonets from scavenged farm tools during early skirmishes, a makeshift lethality that belies the industrial horror brewing in shipyards below. Historians debate if this invasion was imperial overreach or a desperate grab for resources amid global depression, a resource scramble that mirrors today's geopolitical tussles over rare earths and oil pipelines, where superpowers jostle without firing shots yet. Your pulse quickens as the mist swirls with visions of China's endless suffering. Nanking's streets running red in 1937 with massacres that claim hundreds of thousands, civilians herded like cattle to slaughter, and the empathy crashes over you like a tidal wave for the women enduring unspeakable violations, their stories buried under propaganda until unearthed decades later, a hidden scar on history's flesh. The sensory thread twists again, the metallic bite now salted with the coppery essence of spilled blood soaking Asian soil, foreshadowing Pearl Harbor's thunderous betrayal, as you feel the global noose tightening, alliances fracturing like brittle alliances in a board game gone wrong. In Prague's cobblestone squares, you witness the Munich Agreement's betrayal, Chamberlain's umbrella waving triumphantly while Czechs weep in silence, Sudetenland handed over like an unwanted gift, and the sarcasm rises how peace in our time ages like milk left in the sun, souring into war's inevitability, worse than betting your house on a coin flip rigged from the start. Your coat billows in a sudden gust carrying French whispers of Maginot Line fortifications, bunkers staring defiantly at the Rhine while Germans plot Ardennes detours, and academics argue if France's defensive mindset was strategic wisdom or fatal hubris. A fortress mentality that crumbles like sandcastles against blitzkrieg tides. The chill settles into your joints now, a persistent throb that pulses with the drumbeat of marching boots echoing from Berlin rallies, where Hitler's oratory whips crowds into frenzies of salutes and Sieg Heils, his promises of Lebensraum dripping like honey over poisoned barbs, and in ironic reflection, you think how his cult of personality prefigures today's celebrity politicians, charisma masking malice behind podium smiles. You zoom out once more, the continent a tinderbox with sparks flying from every corner, Anschluss cheers in Vienna, Ethiopian gasps under gas clouds, Spanish skies scarred by Stukas, and in that panoramic sweep, you glimpse the tragic poetry of a world sleepwalking toward abyss. leaders fiddling while fuses burn short, leaving you stranded in the gathering gale, skin taut with anticipation, ears straining for the first crack of thunder that will shatter the illusion of peace and unleash the deluge you can already hear rumbling on the horizon. You feel the crack at last, a thunderous rupture that splits the fog like a veil torn by invisible hands, hurling you across the Polish border at dawn on September 1st, 1939, where the ground trembles under the iron treads of German panzers, slicing through Dukist fields like knives through butter, the air exploding with the roar of Stuka dive bombers screeching their siren wails to shatter nerves before bombs even fall, and your boots sink into the soft earth, churned by fleeing civilians. Their screams mingling with the acrid burst of cordite that burns your nostrils like a forgotten cigarette stubbed out on skin. The chill in your veins sharpens now, evolving from prickling unease to a vice-like grip around your chest, squeezing breath from lungs as if the weight of impending doom presses down like an unseen boot, and you taste the metallic tang morphing into the coppery flood of fresh blood spilled on frontier soil, a motif surging like a river breaching its banks, carrying the debris of shattered illusions downstream. Your coat whips in the chaos as you dodge horse-drawn carts overloaded with wide-eyed families clutching bundled belongings, their faces etched with terror that mirrors the academic debate over whether Hitler's blitzkrieg was a revolutionary tactic born of desperation or a meticulously planned lightning strike honed from Guderian's armoured theories. A lightning-fast evolution from World War I's stagnant trenches that caught the poles and the world flat-footed, much like how today's cyber attacks blitz through defences before firewalls even flicker. Historians still argue if the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, that unholy August alliance between Nazi swastika and Soviet hammer, was Stalin's cynical stall for time or Hitler's masterful feint to secure his eastern flank. But as you witness Luftwaffe planes strafing columns of refugees, bullets stitching the ground like erratic sewing machines, you feel the empathy crash over you for the mothers shielding infants with their bodies, their cries a haunting chorus against the mechanical din, a shocking tableau of innocence shredded in the gears of geopolitics. The fog dissipates into dust clouds kicked up by tanks rumbling like mechanical beasts, their exhaust mixing with the earthy scent of upturned soil that clings to your skin like guilt, and in a zoom-out poetic breath, you see Europe as a vast canvas where brushstrokes of invasion paint over borders in bold red. The Wehrmacht's won. 5 million men pouring through like ink from a spilled bottle, overwhelming Polish cavalry charges that feel archaic against motorized might, a mismatch as lopsided as pitting a flip phone against quantum computing in today's tech wars. Your pulse hammers in your ears as you scramble for cover behind a splintered fence, artillery shells whistling overhead like vengeful ghosts, and you ponder the absurd tidbit that some Polish soldiers fashioned anti-tank barriers from felled trees wrapped in barbed wire during frantic preparations, a desperate improvisation that crumbled like matchsticks under panzer treads, highlighting the tragic gap between interwar budgets and modern warfare's insatiable hunger for steel. The sarcasm rises unbidden how the phony war that followed, with Britain and France declaring war on September 3rd but sitting idle behind the Maginot Line like spectators at a gladiatorial match, feels like ghosting a crisis text after promising urgent help, leaving Poland to twist in the wind as German forces encircle Warsaw in a siege that turns the capital into an inferno of rubble and resolve. Your hands blister from helping dig hasty trenches alongside wide-eyed recruits, the dirt caking under nails like accusations of Allied inaction, and in that frantic labour, you glimpse the shocking element of civilian defiance. Housewives boiling oil to pour from windows on advancing troops, their faces set in grim determination that masks the terror gnawing within, a quiet heroism born from knowing retreat means erasure. The chill spreads now, a numbing wave that leaves your fingers tingling as night falls over bombed-out villages, where fires flicker like malevolent eyes in the dark, illuminating the faces of orphans huddled in cellars, their whimpers a sad underscore to the distant rumble of Soviet tanks crossing from the east on September 17th, fulfilling the pact's secret protocols to carve Poland like a carcass at a feast. And you feel the injustice sear through you like a branding iron, the way two tyrants divvy up a sovereign nation while the world averts its gaze, akin to superpowers today partitioning digital realms through shadowy data deals. Your breath fogs in the cooling air, carrying the evolved tang now thickened with the greasy smoke of burning homes, a motif billowing like funeral pyres signalling the end of illusions. As Polish radios crackle with defiant broadcasts urging resistance, even as cities crumble under aerial onslaughts that level hospitals and schools without mercy, in a moment of deep empathy, you cradle a wounded partisan whose eyes glaze with pain. His whispered tales of horseback charges against tanks a testament to futile bravery that breaks your heart like fragile porcelain. And historians debate if Poland's 39-day stand was a doomed quixotic fight or a moral beacon that delayed Hitler's western pivot, buying precious weeks for unprepared allies, a delay as critical as hitting snooze on a doomsday alarm in our era of climate tipping points. The sarcasm cuts through again how the Sitzkrieg, or phony war, drags on for months, with leaflets dropped instead of bombs. Feels like trash talking without throwing punches, leaving soldiers bored in bunkers while diplomats dither, a farce that masks the gathering storm over Scandinavia and France. Your skin itches with the grime of unwashed days as you evade patrols in shadowed woods, the chill settling into a persistent shiver that rattles your teeth, foreshadowing the winter horrors to come in the east. And in that wooded refuge, you overhear whispers of French complacency behind their vaunted Maginot fortifications, concrete behemoths staring eastward while Germans plot northern flanks, an oversight as glaring as building a fortress wall, but forgetting the back door in today's cybersecurity blunders. The fog creeps back, now laced with the distant boom of Warsaw's fall on September 27th, where civilians dig through debris for loved ones, their resilience a shocking spark amid the ruins, and you feel the mood shift from frantic defense to resigned occupation, the weight of partition pressing like an iron yoke on necks bowed but unbroken. Your pulse slows in the encroaching dusk, the metallic tang fading into the earthy musk of forest floor as stars prick the sky like distant hopes. But beneath it all lurks a psychological chill that whispers of escalations brewing, leaving you huddled by a dying fire, eyes straining into the night for the next silhouette of doom emerging from the haze, heart heavy with the knowledge that this invasion is merely the overture to a symphony of suffering that will engulf the globe in its discordant crescendo. You sense the thunder's echo fade into a deceptive hush as the mist reforms around you, now thinning into a ghostly veil that drapes the French countryside like a shroud over unburied dead, pulling you westward across the Vistula's bloodied banks toward the manicured hedgerows of Normandy, where spring blossoms mock the gathering storm, and the air shifts to a crisp, deceptive calm laced with the faint yeasty ferment of unharvested fields, evolving the metallic tang into something earthier, more deceptive, like the loam hiding landmines beneath innocent turf, a motif burrowing deeper into the soil of history, ready to erupt in unexpected blasts that shatter complacency like glass under tank tracks. Your boots squelch through muddied paths flanking the Maginot Line's concrete monoliths, those hulking bunkers staring eastward with blind confidence, their gun ports like unblinking eyes fixed on a phantom threat, while Germans mass in the Ardennes' shadowed forests, and you feel the chill coil around your spine anew, mutating into a prickling anticipation that raises hairs on your neck, as if static electricity charges the air before a lightning strike, much like how today's AI hype builds invisible tensions in boardrooms, promising security while vulnerabilities lurk in the code. Historians still debate whether France's fortress mentality was a strategic masterstroke, rooted in World War I's trench scars, or a fatal delusion that ignored mobility's revolution. But as you crouch behind a pillbox, peering through slits at empty horizons, you overhear officers boasting of impregnable defences while scouts whisper of unusual quiet across the border, their complacency a ticking bomb that will detonate on May 10th, 1940, when Hitler's sickle cut slices through Belgium and the Netherlands like a scythe through wheat, overwhelming neutral nations in days with paratroopers dropping like deadly rain and panzers roaring unchecked. The empathy surges through you for Dutch families awakening to Luftwaffe shadows blotting the sun, their windmills spinning futilely as bombs crater tulip fields, children clutching dolls amid evacuations that feel like biblical plagues, and in that chaotic flight, you glimpse the absurd tidbit that some Belgian civilians fashioned homemade barricades from overturned carts and furniture, a desperate patchwork that crumples like paper under Stuka dives, highlighting the tragic mismatch between civilian grit and mechanized warfare, akin to protesting data breaches with sticky notes on screens in our digital age. Your coat snags on barbed wire as you scramble southward, the fabric tearing with a sound like ripping flesh, heart pounding in sync with the distant rumble of engines that heralds the Ardennes breakthrough, where French generals dismissed the dense woods as impassable for tanks, their maps outdated like vinyl records in a streaming world, and you zoom out for a poetic breath, viewing Western Europe as a vast tapestry unravelling thread by thread. The Wehrmacht's 136 divisions weaving through like invasive vines strangling ancient oaks, encircling Allied forces in a pocket of doom that traps 400,000 men against the Channel's unforgiving waves. The chill deepens into a bone-aching throb now, pulsing with the frantic retreats toward Dunkirk, where beaches become graveyards of abandoned equipment tanks sinking in sand, rifles discarded like broken promises, and you feel the sarcasm well up as British Expeditionary Force commanders order a miracle evacuation. Operation Dynamo turning civilian yachts and fishing boats into unlikely saviours, ferrying soldiers across choppy waters under Messerschmitt strafes, a flotilla of hope amid the flotsam of defeat. Worse than coordinating a group chat evacuation during a flash flood with spotty signal. Your skin blisters from saltwater spray as you wade into the shallows, helping haul sodden troops aboard bobbing vessels, their faces smeared with oil and fear, uniforms clinging like second skins heavy with the sea's salty embrace. And in that desperate scramble, you overhear tales of Luftwaffe pilots machine-gunning swimmers like fish in a barrel, the water turning crimson while RAF Spitfires duel overhead in dogfights that paint the sky, with contrails like abstract art gone mad. The empathy crashes over you like a rogue wave for the French rearguards holding the perimeter, their sacrifices buying precious hours as 338th Ulan men escape in 9 days, a numerical miracle that Churchill hails as deliverance but warns is no victory. His voice crackling over radios in makeshift camps where exhausted soldiers collapse on English soil, dreaming of home amid the stink of wet wool and cordite. Historians argue if Dunkirk was a logistical triumph or a propaganda spin on disaster, turning retreat into resolve, but as you stagger ashore at Dover, cliffs rising white and defiant against the grey sea, you sense the mood shift from panic to grim determination. Britain's island fortress now isolated but unbowed, ration books clutched like talismans against the coming blitz. The metallic tang returns sharper, now fused with the briny zest of Channel spray that clings to your tongue like regret, a motif cresting like waves that erode even the sturdiest shores as France crumbles in weeks. Paris falling on June 14th without a fight, swastikas draping the Eiffel Tower like funeral veils while collaborators raise toasts in cafes once buzzing with resistance whispers. Your pulse races as you flee southward through vineyards turned battlegrounds, Vichy regime rising from the ashes of defeat like a puppet on strings, Pétain's armistice slicing France in two occupied north, free south, yet both shackled to Nazi whims, and in that fractured landscape, you glimpse the shocking element of ordinary betrayal, neighbours denouncing Jews for petty gains, their whispers deadlier than bullets, a moral rot that spreads like mildew in damp cellars. The sarcasm bites hard how Vive la France twists into collaboration's sour wine, worse than selling out your group project for solo credit in a cutthroat class. Your coat, tattered and salt-crusted, weighs you down as you hide in a barn amid hay bales that prick like accusations, overhearing Free French broadcast from London, where de Gaulle rallies the diaspora with defiant oratory, his voice a beacon piercing the blackout. An academics debate if France's swift fall was due to outdated tactics or internal divisions. A collapse as sudden as a house of cards in a gale, foreshadowing the island nation's lonely stand. The chill settles into your marrow once more, a persistent hum that vibrates with the hum of approaching bombers, leaving you curled in the straw, eyes fixed on the slatted roof where stars wink through gaps like distant allies, heart heavy with the knowledge that this defeat is but a prelude. The fog of war regrouping over the Channel for Britain's defiant hour, whispers of radar chains and Spitfire wings stirring in the night wind that carries the faint, evolving tang of aviation fuel and resolve. You huddle in a makeshift Anderson shelter buried in a London backyard, the corrugated iron curving over your head like a ribcage of some ancient beast, its damp walls seeping moisture that soaks into your woolen jumper and sends shivers racing down your spine. The chill now a relentless pulse that throbs in time with the distant wail of air raid sirens slicing through the blackout night, evolving from the briny grip of channel waves into a bone-deep tremor amplified by the Earth's own vibrations under Luftwaffe boots marching across the skies. Your fingers dig into the earthen floor, nails caking with mud that smells of wet soil and fear sweat, as you press your ear against the cold metal, listening for the ominous drone of Heinkel bombers approaching like a swarm of mechanical locusts, their engines humming a dirge that drowns out the muffled sobs of neighbours crammed beside you. Children clutching teddy bears with stuffing leaking like lost innocence. Mothers whispering prayers that feel as fragile as the blackout curtains fluttering in the breeze. The metallic tang on your tongue sharpens once more, now fused with the oily residue of blackout paint smeared on windows to hide flickering candlelight. A motif flaring like tracer rounds across the narrative, illuminating the fragile veil between civilian life and aerial apocalypse, and you feel the empathy well up for the factory workers emerging from shifts only to dive into these tin tombs, their faces etched with exhaustion that mirrors the craters pocking the landscape after each raid, much like how today's remote workers hunker in home offices during digital blackouts, but without the luxury of a logout button to escape the onslaught. Historians still debate whether Winston Churchill's defiant broadcasts, crackling through bakelite radios in these shelters, were rhetorical masterpieces that steeled British resolve or necessary propaganda to mask the island's precarious isolation. His gravelly voice promising, "We shall fight on the beaches," like a mantra against despair, a verbal fortress that held when concrete failed, and in that underground hush, you overhear a family reciting his words like scripture, their breath sinking in rhythmic defiance amid the blackout's oppressive gloom. Your skin prickles with gooseflesh as the first bombs whistle down, exploding in thunderous blooms that shake the shelter like a giant's fist pounding the earth. Shards of soil raining through vents while the air thickens with dust that coats your throat like powdered regret. And you ponder the absurd tidbit that some Londoners fashioned blackout masks from old stockings to shield eyes from searchlight glare. A makeshift ingenuity born from necessity that turns everyday fabrics into armour against the night sky's terrors, akin to jury rigging a VPN from household routers in our era of cyber sieges, where privacy hangs by a thread against invisible assaults. The chill intensifies into a shuddering wave now, rattling your teeth as anti-aircraft guns bark in reply, their flashes piercing the dark like accusatory fingers pointing heavenward, illuminating barrage balloons bobbing like ghostly sentinels tethered to the city, and in that chaotic symphony, you zoom out for a poetic breath, viewing Britain as a lone lighthouse battered by storm-tossed waves, its beam of radar stations sweeping the channel for incoming raiders, a fragile glow against the encroaching void where Hitler's Operation Sea Lion lurks unlaunched. Thwarted by the RAF Spitfires and hurricanes dancing deadly ballets in the clouds, your pulse thunders in your ears, syncing with the staccato of machine guns from rooftop ACAC batteries, where volunteer fire watchers scan horizons for incendiaries raining like hellish fireworks, their buckets of sand and stirrup pumps feeble talismans against the inferno, and you feel the sarcasm bubble up how Goering's boast of Luftwaffe supremacy crumbles like overcooked biscuits when radar chains, those unsung chains of electronic eyes strung along the coast, detect raids before they cross the water, turning the Battle of Britain into a high-stakes poker game where Britain bluffs with inferior numbers but superior tech. Worse than betting your life savings on a glitchy app during a stock market crash. The empathy crashes through you like a collapsing wall for the young pilots scrambling from airfields at Biggin Hill, barely out of school yet, dogfighting in cramped cockpits where G-forces crush ribs and fear not stomachs. Their voices crackling over radios with clipped accents, masking terror as they tally kills like grim scorecards. And in that aerial melee, you glimpse the shocking element of mercy denied. German pilots parachuting into hostile fields, only to be captured or worse by pitchfork-wielding farmers, their silk chutes billowing like failed surrender flags in the wind. Historians wrangle over if Hitler's shift from targeting RAF bases to bombing London, the Blitz's birth in September 1940, was a strategic blunder born of revenge after a RAF raid on Berlin, or a deliberate terror tactic to break civilian morale. But as incendiaries clatter onto rooftops like demonic hail, igniting fires that paint the skyline orange, You huddle tighter, the heat seeping through the shelter's seams while sirens wail their all clear like reluctant angels, and you ponder how St. Paul's Cathedral stands defiant amid the flames, its dome a symbol of endurance that photographers capture in iconic shots, turning rubble into resilience posters that plaster tube stations where families sleep on platforms like subterranean refugees. Your coat steams in the rising warmth from nearby blazes, fabric singed at edges as you emerge into the dawn's grey light, streets littered with debris where fire brigades hose smouldering embers, their faces soot-streaked masks of exhaustion. And in that post-raid hush, you overhear tales of underground defiance tube performers singing Vera Lynn's We'll Meet Again to lift spirits amid the stink of unwashed bodies and fear, a musical bulwark against the psychological siege that grinds nerves finer than rationed flour. The metallic tang lingers, now charred with the smoky aftertaste of phosphor bombs that burn through flesh like acid rain, a motif smouldering like embers in the narrative, fanning flames of resolve as Churchill's broadcasts urge, "Keep calm and carry on," a slogan that masks the terror but fuels the fight. And you feel the mood shift from cowering survival to steely grit. Housewives donning ARP helmets to spot fires, while children collect shrapnel like macabre souvenirs, their innocence warped but unbroken in the crucible of nightly raids. Your skin itches with phantom ash as you navigate cratered pavements toward the Thames, where barrage balloons tug at cables like impatient kites, reflecting in oily waters that lap against sandbagged embankments. And in that riverside vigil, you sense the turning tide the RAF's radar-guided intercepts chewing through Luftwaffe formations, pilots logging 5 sorties a day on frayed nerves and black coffee, their victories tallied in Churchill's "Never was so much owed by so many to so few," a debt paid in vapour trails and fallen heroes. The chill eases slightly now, warmed by the flicker of communal fires where strangers share tea from thermoses, bonds forged in shared peril that outlast the bombs, and you ponder the academic uncertainty over whether the Battle of Britain's September 15th climax, when 56 German planes fell in a single day, was the decisive blow, or if Hitler's eastern pivot to Russia sealed the Luftwaffe's fate. A diversion that spares Britain but dooms millions in the snows ahead. Your pulse steadies amid the rubble-strewn dawn, the fog lifting to reveal a battered but unbowed city, where barrage sirens fade into birdsong and the first buses rumble through cleared paths, hearts swelling with the quiet heroism of blackout lives postmen delivering letters through chaos, bakers kneading dough by candlelight, and in that resilient rhythm, you feel the sarcasm soften into admiration, how London's spirit bends but doesn't break, worse than enduring a marathon Zoom call during a power outage, but emerging with stories that echo through generations. The sensory thread smoulders on, the tang now softened with the sooty warmth of survival's hearth, leaving you standing amid the wreckage, eyes lifting to a sky streaked with contrails like victory scars, mood shifting from besieged dread to a tentative dawn of defiance that whispers of invasions averted and battles yet to rage across wider horizons. You slip through the back alleys of occupied Paris like a ghost in the blackout, your footsteps muffled on cobblestones slick with evening dew that gleams under the faint sliver of moon peeking through rationed clouds, the air thick with the musty scent of unlit Gauloise's cigarettes smuggled in coat pockets, and the underlying rot of garbage piled in corners where sanitation trucks dare not venture under curfew. And the chill creeps back into your bones now, mutating from the aerial throb of bomber engines into a stealthy shiver that slithers up your spine like a whisper from the shadows, leaving your skin prickling as if invisible fingers trace warnings on your neck, a motif coiling tighter like hidden wires in the city's underbelly, ready to spark sabotage at the slightest touch. Your coat brushes against a rough brick wall etched with faint V for Victory symbols scratched in haste by unseen hands, their chalky residue flaking onto your sleeves like dandruff from a nervous scalp, and you feel the empathy swell for the ordinary shopkeepers turned resistors who risk Gestapo knocks at midnight for harbouring Allied pilots downed over the Channel, their attics transformed into precarious havens where whispers replace conversations and every creak of floorboards could summon death in polished boots. Much like how today's whistleblowers hide digital leaks in encrypted drives, dodging corporate hounds with keystrokes instead of coded knocks, the metallic tang returns subtly on your tongue, now laced with the coppery bite of blood from a bitten lip to stifle coughs in these clandestine meetings, evolving like a secret code muttered in cafes where eyes dart suspiciously over espresso cups, and you hunker in a dimly lit basement where resistance fighters huddle around a flickering candle, their faces gaunt from rationed bread that tastes of sawdust and regret, plotting to derail German supply trains with homemade explosives fashioned from fertilizer and stolen dynamite. A physical act of defiance that sends tremors through your hands as you help wire the charges, fingers numb from the damp cold seeping through cracked walls. Historians still debate whether the French resistance was a unified force of heroic saboteurs or a fragmented mosaic of communists, Gaullists, and opportunists whose efforts delayed Nazi reinforcements by mere days or turned the tide in subtle ways. But as you listen to their hush plans, blowing bridges to halt panzer columns, cutting phone lines to sow confusion, you ponder the shocking element of betrayal lurking in every shadow. Neighbours turning informers for a loaf of bread or a promise of safety. Their whispers deadlier than bullets in this war of secrets. A moral quagmire that twists your gut like a knife in the dark. The sarcasm bubbles up unbidden how Vichy's collaboration slogan feels like gaslighting an entire nation into believing occupation is just a bad roommate situation. Worse than swiping left on a dating app only to match with your ex's toxic twin. Ignoring the red flags waving like swastikas from the Eiffel Tower, your pulse quickens in the stifling air heavy with the scent of unwashed bodies and paraffin. A sensory struggle that claws at your throat as cigarette smoke curls like forbidden thoughts. And in that cramped space, you revisit the ghost of Churchill's broadcast echoing from hidden radios tuned to BBC frequencies. His gravelly defiance now fueling these underground cells, where women like André de Jong organise escape lines across the Pyrenees, smuggling downed airmen through mountain passes under Nazi noses, their courage a quiet fire that warms your chilled resolve amid the damp. The absurd tidbit strikes you as you handle a forged identity card printed on scavenged paper. Some resistors fashioned fake stamps from carved potatoes dipped in ink. A culinary craft turned clandestine weapon that fools checkpoints with vegetable precision, highlighting the ingenuity born from desperation, akin to hacking a smart lock with a 3D printed key in our era of digital fortresses, where low-tech trumps high-security hubris. Your skin itches with phantom lice from shared blankets in these safe houses, the chill deepening into a gnawing ache that mirrors the hunger gnawing at bellies fed on black market scraps. And you feel the mood shift from whispered strategy to tense action as you slip out into the night, dodging Wehrmacht patrols whose flashlights sweep alleys like predatory eyes, heart hammering against ribs like a prisoner signaling for release. In Poland's shadowed forests, the mist reforms around you into pine-scented vales, where Home Army partisans ambush convoys with Molotov cocktails hurled from tree lines, their faces smeared with mud for camouflage, and you empathize deeply with the teachers turned fighters running underground schools to preserve language and history against Nazi erasure, children learning algebra amid grenade drills, their innocence armored in resilience that breaks your heart like fragile glass under occupation's heel. The metallic tang sharpens again, now infused with the piney resin of forest sap sticking to your fingers as you help dig foxholes, a motif rooting deeper into the earth like guerrilla networks spreading underground, connecting cells from Warsaw's sewers to Yugoslavia's mountains, where Tito's partisans wage hit-and-run wars that tie down German divisions better than any formal army. Your breath fogs in the crisp woodland air, carrying the evolved chill now laced with the smoky warmth of partisan campfires, where stories of betrayal mingle with songs of defiance. And in that flickering glow, you glimpse the shocking sadism of reprisals, villages burned for sheltering fighters, families executed in town squares as warnings scrawled in blood, a cycle of terror that fuels rather than quells the resistance, much like how online trolls today amplify backlash by feeding the flames they claim to extinguish. The sarcasm cuts through the night how Himmler's SS labels partisans bandits to justify atrocities feels like rebranding whistleblowers as hackers to silence truths, worse than gaslighting a victim into believing their pain is self-inflicted in a toxic relationship. Your pulse steadies amid the rustle of leaves hiding snipers' nests, where women like Christina Scarbeck-Churchill's favourite spy parachute in with silk maps sewn into scarves, their multilingual whispers unravelling Nazi codes, and you revisit the Enigma machine's ghost from Bletchley Park, where Turing's team cracks messages that save convoys from U-boat wolves, a mathematical ballet that turns intercepted gibberish into life-saving intelligence, their secrecy a veil thicker than any fog. The absurd tidbit emerges as you handle a radio transceiver hidden in a suitcase some agents fashioned antennas from bicycle frames coiled with wire, broadcasting defiance from attics while dodging direction finders, a pedal-powered rebellion that outwits Gestapo vans prowling like sharks in urban seas, akin to jury-rigging a drone from drone parts in today's surveillance skirmishes, where ingenuity dances with danger. Your skin crawls with the itch of forest undergrowth brushing against legs during night marches, the chill settling into a vigilant hum that vibrates with coded knocks on doors, mood shifting from hidden planning to bold execution as you sabotage a rail line, explosives blooming in the dark like deadly flowers that derail troop trains, heart swelling with the quiet triumph of shadows striking back against the light of oppression. In Holland's flooded polders, the mist dampens into a watery haze where Anne Frank's diary echoes unspoken from hidden annexes. Families walled in by false bookcases while collaborators prowl below, and you feel the deep empathy for the children drawing by candlelight, their laughter stifled like dreams deferred, a childhood compressed into whispers that pierce your soul like shards from bombed-out windows. The metallic tang lingers, now diluted with the brackish floodwaters seeping through dikes breached for defense, a motif submerging like sunken hopes in the narrative, leaving you wading through knee-deep regret, eyes fixed on a horizon where Allied parachutes bloom like distant promises, mood drifting toward the eastern fronts where Soviet partisans harry supply lines with guerrilla precision, their frozen breaths a testament to endurance that foreshadows the red tide's inexorable advance. You press onward through the pine-needled underbrush of Poland's defiant woods, where partisan rifles crack like brittle branches underfoot in winter's grip, but the chill in your marrow thaws abruptly into a scorching heat that sears your skin like a branding iron fresh from the forge, yanking you southward across the Mediterranean's azure expanse toward the sun-blasted dunes of North Africa, where the air shimmers with mirages that dance like taunting phantoms, and the metallic tang on your tongue morphs into the gritty bite of wind-whipped sand that grits between your teeth like unrefined sugar in a desert storm, a motif scorching hotter as it evolves from forested whispers to blistering blasts that scour flesh and soul alike, leaving you gasping for breath in air so dry it steals moisture from your lungs like a thief in the night. Your coat, once a shield against European rains, now hangs heavy with sweat-soaked wool that clings like a second, suffocating skin as you stagger across endless golden waves of Sahara grit, boots sinking ankle-deep in the shifting terrain that swallows tracks as quickly as it devours hope, and you feel the empathy blaze through you for the Italian soldiers trudging under Mussolini's delusions of a new Roman Empire, their uniforms caked in dust that turns khaki to ochre, while dysentery twists their guts like barbed wire, promising glory, but delivering only mirage-choked marches toward British lines in Egypt, much like how today's startup founders chase unicorn dreams through venture capital deserts, only to wither under the heat of unmet KPIs without an oasis in sight. The sarcasm ignites in your parched throat how Il Duce's 1940 invasion from Libya into Egypt, aiming for the Suez Canal like a gambler betting the house on a rigged slot machine, feels like overextending your Netflix queue, only to crash mid-binge, worse than invading a neighbour's barbecue uninvited and expecting to claim the grill as your own. But as Axis forces push eastward with initial swagger, you sense the hubris cracking under the relentless sun that bakes rations into bricks and engines into seized relics. Historians still wrangle over whether Mussolini's North African gambit was a sideshow distraction from Europe's main theatre, or a critical artery for oil and supply lines that could have choked the British Empire if successful. But as you shield your eyes from the glare bouncing off endless horizons, you overhear disgruntled blackshirts muttering about promised victories turning to sandstorms that blind and bury. Their tanks bogged down in drifts while British Matilda heavies rumble counterattacks that shatter Italian morale like fragile amphorae dropped from ancient heights. Your skin blisters under the unyielding blaze, each step a labour that pulls sweat from pores like confessions from the condemned. And in that furnace forge, you glimpse the shocking element of Bedouin guides navigating for both sides with nomadic neutrality, their camels laden with water skins fashioned from goat hides that slosh like lifelines in the void, a timeless ingenuity that outlasts mechanized invaders, akin to local hackers in today's cyber wars slipping through firewalls with low-tech social engineering while superpowers hurl code like artillery. The chill from Europe's shadows lingers as a phantom ache now, contrasting the heat that warps metal canteens into scalding hazards, pulsing through your veins like a fever dream where frostbite memories clash with sunstroke realities, and you hunker behind a ridge as German reinforcements arrive in early 1941 led by the enigmatic Erwin Rommel, the desert fox whose sun-bleached cap shades eyes sharp as a predator's, his Afrika Korps deploying with disciplined fury that turns the tide, pushing British forces back toward Egypt in daring maneuvers that outflank and outpace, tanks kicking up dust plumes like smokescreens for blitzkrieg adapted to sand seas. Your pulse races with the revving engines that echo across wadis like thunder in dry canyons, heart hammering against ribs caged by dehydration's vice, and you feel the deep empathy for Australian diggers holding Tobruk's perimeter against Rommel's sieges, their bayonets fixed in foxholes dug into rock-hard earth while flies swarm like biblical plagues, mates sharing the last drops from canteens that taste of rust and resolve, their Anzac spirit a quiet fire amid the furnace. The sarcasm cuts through the haze how Rommel's reputation as a chivalrous foe, treating prisoners with relative decency, feels like polishing a turd in the annals of war crimes, worse than romanticizing a bank robber for tipping the teller before fleeing. But as his panzers race across the desert in fluid arcs that confound Allied maps, you ponder the academic uncertainty over whether his logistical genius was overstated, or if stretched supply lines from Mediterranean convoys doomed his campaigns from the start. A vulnerability exposed when British ultra-intercepts cracked Enigma codes from Bletchley ghosts tipped the scales with foreknowledge of Axis moves. You zoom out for a poetic breath, viewing the North African theatre as a vast hourglass where sands of time slip through sieges and skirmishes, empires clashing in a golden arena where camels plod beside half-tracks like anachronistic companions, the sun an impartial judge baking victor and vanquished alike in its unblinking gaze. And in that widened vista, you sense the turning at El Alamein in October 1942, where Bernard Montgomery's 8th Army, bolstered by American Shermans and meticulous planning, unleashes a barrage that shatters Rommel's lines like glass under hammer blows, artillery thundering for days in a symphony of steel that leaves your ears ringing and the horizon aflame. Your skin cracks under the relentless UV assault, lips splitting like parched earth as you crawl through minefields where sappers probe with bayonets for buried death. The absurd tidbit striking that some troops fashioned sandshoes from canvas and rope to traverse dunes without sinking, a footwear hack that saves lives amid the chaos of Operation Lightfoot, where infantry advances under creeping barrages that chew the desert into pockmarked hellscapes, akin to modding a gaming rig with duct tape and prayers during an esports tournament blackout. The empathy deepens for New Zealand Maori battalions charging Axis positions, with haka war cries that echo across the sands. Their cultural ferocity, a weapon sharper than bayonets against machine gun nests. Families back home weaving flax mats in prayer for sons fighting in alien heat. And as Montgomery's forces grind forward in a battle of attrition that drains German fuel like blood from a wound, you feel the mood shift from desperate defense to inexorable advance. Axis retreats, leaving burned-out hulks as monuments to overreach. The metallic tang intensifies, now scorched with the acrid fumes of diesel fires blooming from stricken tanks, a motif blazing like signal flares in the narrative, illuminating the path to Tunisia, where Allied torch landings in November 1942 open a Western front. American greenhorns clashing at Kasserine Pass in bloody lessons that temper their steel. Patton's Third Army roaring to relieve the pressure with armoured thrusts that echo Rommel's own tactics turned against him. Your pulse steadies amid the din of clashing armour, the chill a distant memory swallowed by the desert's furnace that forges alliances in fire, and in that heated crucible, you overhear Montgomery's cautious build-up contrasting Rommel's bold dashes, the 8th Army's overwhelming artillery at El Alamein, a grinding mill that crushes Axis dreams. Churchill declaring it the end of the beginning like a prophet sighting land after stormy seas. The sarcasm simmers how Rommel's desert fox moniker romanticizes a general who executed commandos without trial. Feels like hyping a chef for gourmet meals laced with poison, worse than awarding a participation trophy to a serial no-show. But as Axis forces surrender en masse in May 1943, 250,000 prisoners marching into captivity like a defeated legion, you sense the strategic ripple. North Africa cleared open Sicily's door, tying down German divisions that could have bolstered Eastern Front bloodbaths. Your skin, sunburned and sand-scoured, itches with the grit of victory hard won, the chill returning as a nocturnal whisper when stars blanket the dunes like indifferent witnesses. Mood drifting toward the Mediterranean's lapping waves where invasion fleets gather for Italy's boot. Heart heavy with the knowledge that this desert crucible has forged Allied resolve, but at a cost etched in sun-bleached bones scattered across the sands like forgotten warnings. You claw your way out of the Tunisian sands' suffocating embrace, where victory's afterglow fades into the mirage of endless horizons, only to be hurled eastward across the Volga's icy expanse toward the frozen hell of Operation Barbarossa, launched on June 22nd, 1941, when 3 million German troops shattered the dawn with a barrage that echoed like the gods' own fury. Tanks grinding through dew-slicked meadows while Stukas screamed overhead like banshees heralding apocalypse, and the air turns frigid in an instant, whipping your face with sleet that stings like needles forged in Siberian forges, the metallic tang on your tongue now crystallizing into the bitter frost of rusted barbed wire crusted with hoarfrost, a motif freezing solid as it evolves from desert grit to glacial shards that cut deep into the narrative's marrow, leaving you gasping for breath in lungs that burn with each inhale of sub-zero wind howling across the steppes like a vengeful spirit unleashed from ancient tombs. Your boots crunch through crusty snow that hides minefields like buried secrets, the white expanse stretching endlessly under a leaden sky that presses down like the weight of Stalin's paranoia. And you feel the empathy surge through you for the Soviet border guards roused from slumber by the roar of 500,000 vehicles breaching the frontier, their rifles jamming in the cold while families in nearby villages flee barefoot into blizzards that swallow screams whole, much like how today's refugees dash from border walls under drone surveillance, hearts pounding against ribs caged by fear's iron bars, but without the luxury of viral videos to rally global outrage before the storm engulfs them. The chill burrows into your core now, a gnawing void that hollows out your insides like starvation's slow knife, pulsing with the frantic retreats of Red Army units caught flat-footed despite spies' frantic cables warning of betrayal, their divisions encircled in massive kettles where hundreds of thousands surrender with frostbitten hands raised, eyes hollow from the shock of a pact turned to poison overnight, and in that chaotic rout, you overhear panicked officers radioing Moscow for orders that never come. Stalin's disbelief paralyzing the high command like a stroke in the Kremlin's gilded halls, a leadership vacuum as deadly as the Panzer's 88 mid-lightsome shells, punching through T-34 armor like paper targets at a carnival shoot. Historians still argue whether Hitler's eastward obsession was ideological zeal to crush Bolshevism and seize Lebensraum, or a fatal overreach driven by oil hunger for the Caucasus fields. A gamble that stretched supply lines thinner than a beggar's coat in winter gales. But as you stumble through burning villages where Einsatzgruppen round up civilians for mass graves, bullets cracking like whips over open pits, you ponder the shocking element of local collaborators welcoming invaders as liberators from Stalin's yoke, only to trade one tyrant for another in a devil's bargain sealed with blood-soaked earth, their makeshift signs fashioned from bedsheets waving "Willkommen" in trembling hands, a tragic naivety that mirrors how some today flock to populist saviours promising quick fixes amid economic tempests, only to wake in chains of their own forging. The sarcasm ignites in your frost-numbed mind how the non-aggression pact's ink barely dried, before becoming kindling for this inferno feels like signing a prenup, only to elope with a divorce lawyer, worse than trusting a weather app that predicts sunshine during a hurricane. But as German Army Group Center barrels toward Moscow with blitzkrieg fury that captures Minsk in days and Smolensk in weeks, you feel the mood plummet into desperate resolve among Soviet civilians digging anti-tank ditches with bare hands blistered raw, their faces set in grim masks that hide the terror gnawing like rats in granaries, emptied by scorched earth retreats. Your skin numbs under layers of scavenged greatcoats stripped from fallen comrades, the fabric stiff with frozen blood that cracks like eggshells with each movement. And in that Arctic trudge, you zoom out for a poetic breath, viewing the Eastern Front as a colossal canvas where winter paints in whites and greys. vast armies clashing like titanic forces of nature. The Wehrmacht's three-pronged thrust north to Leningrad, center to Moscow, south to Kiev, splintering the Red Army into fractured shards that bleed rivers of men into the snow. A human hemorrhage that stains the steppes crimson under auroral skies indifferent to the slaughter below. Your pulse thuds dully in ears muffled by fur hats fashioned from dog pelts by desperate villagers. Heart labouring against the cold that claims more lives than bullets in these early months. Where German soldiers freeze in summer uniforms unprepared for Russia's general winter, their fingers blackening with frostbite while engines seize in sub-zero oils. A logistical nightmare that turns conquerors into beggars scrounging for potato peels amid partisan ambushes that snap like wolf traps in the woods. The empathy deepens into a hollow ache for Ukrainian peasants caught between hammers, welcoming Germans only to endure Babi Yar's ravines filled with machine-gunned bodies. Mothers clutching infants in final embraces that echo through eternity. Their grief a silent wail against the ideological meat grinder that grinds Slavs into inferior dust under Aryan boots. And in that ravaged landscape, you glimpse the absurd tidbit of soldiers melting snow for water, only to boil it with captured samovars etched with family crests. A domestic relic turned survival tool in a war that devours homes and histories alike. Akin to repurposing grandma's heirloom quilt, as a bulletproof vest in modern urban skirmishes where nostalgia clashes with necessity, the metallic tang crystallizes further, now encrusted with the icy bite of gunmetal frozen to lips during night watches, a motif solidifying like permafrost that locks the ground in unyielding grip, foreshadowing Leningrad's siege where civilians chew leather belts for sustenance amid 900 days of encirclement. Their diaries scribbled by candle stubs a testament to endurance that pierces your soul like shards from shattered windows. Your breath plumes in white clouds that dissipate like fleeting hopes, carrying the evolved chill laced with the smoky haze of burning peat, dug from bogs for fuel. Mood sinking into a stoic grimness as Soviet factories relocate eastward beyond the Urals, churning out T-34s that will soon counter the invaders' steel tide. Workers toiling in 40 degrees with fingers welded to machines by frost. Their resolve a forge hotter than any blast furnace. The sarcasm simmers beneath the surface how Hitler's master race rhetoric wilts in Russian winters like tropical plants in a blizzard, feels like hyping a sports car for off-road, only to watch it spin wheels in mud. Worse than launching a viral challenge without testing the waters. But as Army Group North besieges Leningrad with starvation's noose, you feel the tragic poetry of Shostakovich's symphony composed amid the hunger. Notes defying bombs like birdsong in a storm, a cultural defiance that lifts spirits even as bodies waste away. Your skin, chapped and raw from windburn, itches with the phantom crawl of lice thriving in unwashed layers. The chill a constant companion that whispers of turning tides as Siberian reinforcements arrive in white camouflage. Skis hissing over snow like avenging spectres, and in that frozen expanse, you overhear generals plotting Uranus at Stalingrad, encirclements that will trap Paulus's Sixth Army in a cauldron of doom, heart swelling with the quiet anticipation of reversal amid the white wasteland's merciless embrace. The metallic tang lingers, now rhymed with hoarfrost that flakes away like forgotten promises, leaving you trudging through knee-deep drifts toward the Volga's frozen banks, where urban ruins loom like skeletal sentinels guarding the gateway to Soviet Seoul, mood drifting toward the crucible of Stalingrad, where house-to-house hell awaits. Eyes straining through blizzards for the first silhouettes of counterattack emerging from the whiteout like fate's inexorable hand. You hunker in a Leningrad basement amid the skeletal remnants of a once cozy apartment block, where the walls weep condensation that freezes into icy rivulets trickling down like tears from a grieving widow. Your breath pluming invisible clouds that hang heavy in the sub-zero gloom, lit only by a flickering kerosene lamp whose sooty flame dances erratically on the wick trimmed from unravelled socks. And the chill burrows deeper into your flesh now, evolving from the steppes gnawing frost into a starving beast that gnaws at your marrow with teeth sharpened by 900 days of unrelenting siege. The metallic tang on your tongue crystallizing further into the rancid bite of boiled wallpaper paste laced with sawdust bread that sticks to your palate like congealed regret, a motif solidifying like the Neva River's ice bridge that cracks under desperate footfalls. Bridging the gap between survival and surrender in this encircled hell, where Hitler's orders to starve the city into oblivion turn humans into wraiths, wandering snow-choked streets in search of anything edible, rats, skittering through rubble, leather belts softened in soup pots, even the glue from bookbindings peeled like forbidden fruit from library shelves, stripped bare by hunger's insatiable claw. Your skin stretches taut over protruding bones, each movement a symphony of aches that echo the artillery shells pounding the outskirts since September 1941, when German and Finnish forces clamped their vice around the cradle of the revolution, cutting roads and rails like severing lifelines from a still beating heart. And you feel the empathy crush your chest like the weight of unburied corpses piled in frozen stacks along the Ladoga Road, where mothers trudge with sleds bearing children's bodies wrapped in rags for mass graves, dug with pickaxes that ring against permafrost. Their wails lost in the wind howling off the Baltic like accusations against a world that watches but does not intervene, much like how today's social media scrolls past famine footage from distant lands. Hearts briefly tugged before swiping to cat videos without a second thought, but without the buffer of screens to dull the raw agony of watching your neighbour's child waste away to a skeleton in shared squalor. The sarcasm simmers in your hollow belly, how Leningrad Symphony Orchestra performs Shostakovich's Seventh, amid the bombardment, notes defying explosions like a middle finger to Goering's Luftwaffe circling overhead. Feels like hosting a TED Talk during a zombie apocalypse. Worse than live streaming a cooking show with empty pots in a blackout kitchen. But as the composer's defiant strains broadcast over loudspeakers to taunt the besiegers, you sense the cultural resilience blooming like frost flowers on window panes. Artists painting propaganda posters with pigments ground from boot polish, while poets scribble verses on cigarette papers passed hand to hand in bread lines that snake through blizzards, their words a fragile warmth against the encroaching void. Historians still debate whether Hitler's siege strategy was a calculated cruelty to erase Leningrad as a symbol of Bolshevism, or a logistical blunder that tied down Army Group North, while the real prizes Moscow and the oil fields slipped from grasp. But as you chew on a sliver of frozen horse meat scavenged from a bombed stable, stomach churning with the knowledge that pets vanished weeks ago into communal pots, you ponder the shocking element of the road of life across Lake Ladoga's ice. Trucks groaning under supply loads, dodging artillery craters, and thin spots where vehicles plunge through to watery graves. Drivers' faces etched with frostbite scars that peel like old paint. A lifeline as tenuous as threading a needle in a gale. Akin to delivery drones navigating war zones in our drone-dependent age, where algorithms plot paths through no-fly zones but can't account for human desperation's wild variables. Your pulse thuds weakly in ears muffled by a hat knitted from unravelled scarves, heart labouring against the siege's slow strangulation that claims 1 million lives through starvation alone, bodies carted on sleds to the Piskaryovskoye cemetery, where mass trenches swallow the nameless in silent rows, and in that subterranean vigil, you zoom out for a poetic breath, viewing Leningrad as a besieged island in a sea of snow, its spires defiant against the encircling wolves whose howls blend with wolf packs prowling the outskirts for easy prey. The Neva's frozen surface a mirror reflecting humanity's endurance, etched in blue-lipped resolve, where ballerinas rehearse on empty stages with empty stomachs. Their pirouettes a ballet of survival that outlasts the bombs. The empathy deepens into a hollow void for the diary keepers like Tanya Savicheva, a girl chronicling family deaths one by one until her own fades into silence. Her notebook a testament scrawled in pencil stubs that outlives empires, piercing your soul like shards from shattered samovars used for melting snow. And as the siege drags into its second winter, you overhear whispers of cannibalism in the darkest corners, rumours that twist your gut like barbed wire fences ringing the city, a descent into primal horrors that Stalin's propaganda papers over with tales of heroic production, in besieged factories churning shells from scrap metal scavenged under fire. The sarcasm cuts through the gloom how the Nazis' hunger plan to starve Slavs into submission backfires as Soviet resilience hardens like tempered steel in a forge. Feels like dieting by locking the fridge only to find the kids broke in through the window, worse than banning junk food in a house full of secret stashes. But as reinforcements trickle across the ice road in January 1943, breaking the encirclement just enough for evacuation trains to spirit away the skeletal survivors, you sense the mood inch toward grim triumph, Civilians emerging from basements with eyes squinting at sunlight like moles surfacing from eternal night. Their bodies frail, but spirits forged unbreakable in the crucible of 900 days. Your skin, pallid and paper-thin from vitamin scarcity, itches with the phantom crawl of scurvy spots blooming like morbid flowers. The chill a constant companion that whispers of Stalingrad's parallel nightmare unfolding southward, where urban ruins swallow armies whole in rat-infested cellars, and in that transitional hush, you feel the evolving tang now thawed slightly with the watery slush of melting snow, signalling spring's reluctant arrival, a motif dripping like icicles from eaves, melting the siege's grip as the Red Army gathers strength for counter-offensives that will push the invaders back step by bloodied step. Your breath steams in the warming air, carrying the faded chill laced with the musty thaw of unearthed graves as bodies surface from snowdrifts. Mood drifting toward the Volga's banks where Paulus's Sixth Army marches into a cauldron of urban warfare that will redefine suffering, heart heavy with the knowledge that Leningrad's endurance is but one verse in the epic of Soviet sacrifice, eyes straining through lifting mists for the silhouettes of relief columns snaking across the lake, their engines a rumble of redemption amid the white wasteland's fading grip. You awaken abruptly to the gentle sway of a hammock strung below decks on the USS Arizona. Moored in the turquoise embrace of Pearl Harbor on a lazy Sunday morning in December 1941, the humid Hawaiian air thick with the salty kiss of Pacific brine that clings to your sweat-dampened uniform like a lover's reluctant farewell, and the metallic tang on your tongue evolves once more from the frozen bite of Eastern Front rime into the oily residue of engine grease wafting from the battleship row's idling turbines, a motif slicking smoother as it adapts to tropical languor, coating your palate like forgotten coffee, cooled in a tin mug while the faint strum of ukuleles drifts from shore leave, revelers nursing hangovers under swaying palms. Your bunk creaks with the harbour's subtle roll, eyes fluttering open to the muffled chatter of shipmates shuffling cards or scribbling letters home. Their voices a low hum against the distant roar of seaplanes practicing manoeuvres, but as you stretch limbs sore from routine drills, a shocking rumble builds on the horizon, not thunder but something mechanical, predatory, and you bolt upright, heart slamming against ribs like a depth charge in shallow water, the chill returning as a sudden prickle despite the balmy heat, racing up your spine like ice water poured down your back in a prank gone horribly wrong, leaving you gasping as Japanese Zeros streak low over the palm-fringed lagoon, their rising sun emblems gleaming like accusatory eyes in the morning light that turns the water to molten gold flecked with impending doom. The empathy crashes through you like a tidal surge for the sailors caught mid-shave or breakfast, their mundane routines shattered by torpedoes slicing through the harbour's calm surface like sharks scenting blood, explosions blooming underwater in muffled thuds that heave the Arizona's deck beneath your feet, and you scramble topside amid claxons wailing like wounded beasts, smoke billowing from the USS Oklahoma capsizing nearby, with a groan of twisting metal that drowns out screams of trapped men hammering on hulls from within, their frantic pounding a Morse code of desperation that echoes the tragic fate of submariners in today's deep-sea mishaps, where pressure crushes hulls like soda cans under boot heels, but without the buffer of satellite pings to summon rescue before the oxygen runs dry. Historians still debate whether Pearl Harbor was a masterstroke of Japanese audacity, Yamamoto's carrier strike catching the Pacific Fleet napping after decrypted warnings were dismissed as noise in the bureaucratic ether, or a fatal miscalculation that awakened a sleeping giant whose industrial might would grind the Axis to dust. But as you dive for cover behind a gun turret, the sky fills with the whine of dive bombers plunging like kamikaze precursors, their payloads whistling down to ignite ammunition magazines in cataclysmic blasts that hurl bodies skyward like rag dolls tossed by an angry child. The Arizona erupting in a fireball that sears your eyebrows and paints the harbour orange with reflected inferno. Over 1,000 men vaporized in seconds while oil slicks spread like black blood across the waves. A shocking tableau of modern warfare's impersonal fury, where one bomb pierces armor to detonate powder rooms in a chain reaction that rivals nuclear precursors in its raw devastation. Your skin blisters from the radiant heat that warps nearby railings into molten twists, lungs choking on acrid fumes that burn like inhaled acid, while debris rains down in sizzling fragments. And in that hellish chaos, you glimpse the absurd tidbit of sailors fashioning life vests from cork blocks scavenged from storage, bobbing in oil-slicked waters amid flaming slicks that cook the unwary alive. A flotation hack as desperate as jury-rigging a raft from office furniture during a flash flood in a high-rise evacuation gone awry. Where corporate cost-cutting leaves no lifeboats for the rank and file. The sarcasm surges amid the pandemonium. How Roosevelt's day that will live in infamy speech the next day rallies a nation. From isolationist slumber feels like hitting snooze on a global alarm only to jolt awake to the house already ablaze. Worse than ignoring spam calls from fate until the debt collectors kick in the door with torpedoes. But as Congress declares war almost unanimously, you sense the mood pivot from stunned paralysis to vengeful resolve. Factories gearing up overnight to churn out Liberty ships and B-17s like assembly line miracles. Women riveting hulls in Rosie the Riveter defiance, while enlistment lines snake around blocks like Black Friday queues for patriotism instead of gadgets. Your pulse thunders in ears ringing from the blasts, heart laboring against the adrenaline flood that sharpens every sense to knife-edge acuity amid the carnage, where medics drag burned comrades to aid stations overflowing with the maimed. Their moans a chorus underscoring the Pacific Fleet's gutted might. 8 battleships mangled, nearly 200 planes shredded on the tarmac like paper in a shredder, and you feel the deep empathy for Filipino allies caught in the crossfire hours later as Japanese forces storm their shores. MacArthur's "I shall return" vow a hollow echo, as Bataan falls in a death march that claims thousands in scorching heat without water. Prisoners bayoneted for stumbling like discarded extras in a brutal script. A march of horrors that prefigures Guantanamo debates in our time, where enhanced interrogation euphemisms mask the same dehumanizing grind. But without the veil of classified memos to hide the shame, the chill lingers as a psychological undercurrent beneath the tropical swelter, a dissonant shiver that clashes with palm fronds rustling in the trade winds now fouled by smoke plumes rising like funeral pyres over the harbour. And in that smouldering aftermath, you overhear admirals tallying the miracle of absent carriers Yorktown, Enterprise, Lexington at sea, spared the carnage by fate's whimsical hand. A twist that turns disaster into strategic reprieve, allowing the Navy to regroup for Midway's revenge where codebreakers turn the tide with intercepted whispers decoded in dim rooms. Historians wrangle over if Pearl Harbor unified a divided America overnight, or merely accelerated inevitable entry. Isolationism crumbling like the Arizona superstructure under the weight of outrage that floods recruitment offices, with volunteers burning for payback. And as you stagger through the wreckage helping haul the wounded onto stretchers slick with blood and oil, the absurd element emerges in sailors using coconut husks as impromptu bandages to staunch wounds amid the chaos, a tropical improvisation that saves lives in the absence of medkits vaporized in the blasts, akin to MacGyvering a tourniquet from shoelaces during a modern mass shooting drill gone live, where everyday items become lifelines in the blur of panic. Your skin crawls with the itch of soot and salt caking into cuts. The chill a distant echo swallowed by the harbour's humid haze that steams with the heat of burning fuel. Mood shifting from shell-shocked numbness to a simmering fury that boils over into war bonds, rallies and factory shifts running round the clock. Heart heavy with the knowledge that this day of infamy has roused a giant whose roar will echo across Pacific atolls in island-hopping carnage yet to unfold. Eyes straining through the smoke for the silhouettes of rescue boats chugging toward the flaming wreckage, their wakes cutting paths through oil slicks like promises of retribution, etched in the water's dark canvas. You reel from the oil-slicked chaos of Pearl Harbor's flaming wreckage, where the acrid smoke still chokes your lungs like a fist wrapped in barbed wire, only to be flung across the vast Pacific's churning swells toward the coral-fringed atolls of Midway, in June 1942, where the salty spray lashes your face aboard the USS Enterprise's flight deck that pitches wildly underfoot like a bucking bronco in a typhoon. The metallic tang on your tongue now surging with the briny bite of ocean foam mingled with aviation fuel leaking from bullet-riddled wildcats. A motif cresting higher as it adapts from harbour's oily residue to the corrosive salt that etches rust into every seam and soul aboard these floating fortresses adrift in endless blue, leaving you clutching the railing with white-knuckled grip as Zeros swarm the horizon like angry hornets defending a hive, their machine guns chattering death while your carrier's anti-aircraft batteries roar back in deafening symphony that rattles your teeth and drowns out the frantic shouts of deck crews scrambling to launch fighters amid the pandemonium. The chill races through your veins despite the tropical sun beating down like a blacksmith's hammer on anvil skin, mutating from the harbour's shocked shiver into a gut-wrenching dread that coils in your stomach as dive bombers plunge toward Japanese flat tops caught mid-refueling, their decks slick with spilled gasoline that ignites in cataclysmic blooms when American torpedoes flawed and fickle as they often run deep, or dud finally find their mark on Akagi and Kaga, explosions ripping through hulls like paper lanterns in a gale, and you feel the empathy crash over you for the Japanese sailors trapped below in flooding compartments, their cries echoing the Arizona's entombed pleas as flames lick at escape hatches sealed by warped metal, much like how today's submarine crews in deep-sea drills face the claustrophobic terror of rising water, without the Hollywood heroism to soften the raw panic, but without the buffer of simulation resets to erase the finality of drowning in the dark. Historians still debate whether Midway's victory was a triumph of American codebreakers at Station Hypo, who cracked JN-25 ciphers to predict Yamamoto's trap like reading an opponent's poker tells in a high-stakes bluff, or a stroke of luck when dive bombers spotted the carriers through cloud breaks at the perfect vulnerable moment, turning 4 Japanese heavies into flaming pyres that shift the Pacific's balance overnight, a pivotal reversal that halts Japan's expansion, like slamming brakes on a runaway train barreling toward conquest. And in that aerial melee, you dodge strafing runs from Zeros whose pilots loop with acrobatic grace that belies the desperation fueling their kamikaze precursors, your ears popping from pressure changes as the Yorktown absorbs hits that list her dangerously, smoke billowing like a volcano's wrath, while repair crews hammer plates over breaches with sparks flying like fireflies in twilight, their sweat-soaked brows furrowed in grim determination that mirrors the island-hopping grind ahead. The sarcasm surges amid the din how Yamamoto's unsinkable carriers, sinking in minutes feels like hyping a flagship smartphone as waterproof, only to watch it fizzle in a puddle, worse than launching a viral app that crashes on day one from overlooked bugs. But as the last Hiryu goes under with her planes scattering like startled birds, you sense the mood pivot from defensive scramble to offensive momentum. American morale soaring like the dauntless bombers returning to deck scarred but victorious. Pilots collapsing in exhaustion with tales of near misses that etch lines deeper than any tattoo on their young faces. Your skin crawls with the itch of salt-crusted sunburn peeling in sheets from prolonged exposure on open decks. Lungs heaving the humid air thick with cordite that burns like inhaled pepper. And in that carrier's throbbing heart, you overhear admirals plotting Guadalcanal's assault in August 1942, the first American land offensive where Marines storm beaches under withering fire from jungle-hidden bunkers, their boots sinking into volcanic ash that clings like guilt, while snipers pick off the unwary from palm fronds swaying innocently overhead. A shocking tableau of amphibious fury, where landing craft beach amid coral reefs that rip hulls like tin cans, spilling troops into waist-deep water laced with shark shadows drawn by blood trails. The empathy deepens into a hollow ache for the Guadalcanal grunts digging foxholes in malarial mud that breeds fever dreams hotter than the equatorial sun. Their M1 Grands jamming with grit while Japanese Banzai charges crash through the undergrowth at night, like human waves breaking on rocky shores, comrades falling with bayonets buried in chests amid the stink of rotting vegetation and unburied dead, families back home clutching telegrams that arrive like delayed thunder after the storm has passed. A personal toll that echoes the anonymous losses in today's drone strikes where pixels obscure the human cost but can't erase the widow's grief. Your pulse hammers in sync with the rhythmic thud of naval guns pounding Henderson Field, the airstrip that becomes a blood-soaked prize fought over in nocturnal naval clashes where cruisers trade broadsides in Iron Bottom Sound, ships sinking in fiery spirals that light the waves like floating bonfires. And you ponder the academic uncertainty over whether Guadalcanal's 6-month meat grinder was a strategic chokehold on Japan's Solomon supply lines or a Pyrrhic victory that drains American resources for marginal gains. A slog as endless as trench warfare reborn in tropical hell, where dysentery claims more lives than bullets in some companies, medics injecting morphine with shaking hands under flashlight beams that attract sniper fire like moths to flame. The absurd tidbit emerges amid the jungle rot submarines fashion slingshots from rubber tree sap and bootlaces to hunt birds for extra protein. A Boy Scout hack that supplements sea rations tasting of cardboard and despair. Highlighting survival's ingenuity in a theatre where logistics stretch thinner than rationed silk parachutes. Akin to urban foragers in modern sieges scavenging dumpsters for sustenance, while apps promise gourmet delivery that's perpetually out of range. The sarcasm cuts through the humid haze, how Tokyo Rose's propaganda broadcasts taunting GIs with tales of homefront infidelity feel like catfishing troops with psyops bait, worse than spam emails promising love from Nigerian princes during a lonely deployment. But as Henderson's Cactus Air Force scrambles wildcats to duel zeros in daily dogfights that litter the sea with wreckage, you feel the mood inch toward grueling attrition. Both sides bleeding men and machines in a Darwinian contest where malaria mosquitoes outnumber bullets. Heart heavy with the knowledge that this island crucible forges the island-hopping doctrine, bypassing fortified strongholds to starve them into irrelevance. Eyes straining through vine-choked canopies for the silhouettes of relief convoys on the horizon, their smokestacks promising resupply amid the green inferno's unrelenting grip. Your skin, mosquito-bitten and fever-flushed, itches with the phantom crawl of jungle vines snaking like living snares, the chill a feverish undercurrent beneath the swelter that whispers of Leyte Gulf's naval Armageddon ahead, where kamikaze pilots dive like human missiles in divine wind desperation, mood drifting toward the Philippines' reconquest where MacArthur wades ashore with scripted flair. But the real drama unfolds in blood-soaked rice paddies, where banzai waves crash against marine lines in suicidal fervour that shatters psyches like fragile pottery. You claw your way out of the Philippine jungle's suffocating grip, where banzai echoes still ring in your ears like deranged bells tolling for the damned. Vines snagging at your fatigue slick with monsoon mud that cakes your boots heavier than guilt from a battlefield betrayal, only to be yanked across the globe's vast curve toward the shadowed ghettos of Warsaw in 1940, where the air hangs thick with the musty reek of overcrowding and despair seeping from cracked tenement walls. The metallic tang on your tongue now curdling into the sour bile of starvation rations that taste of mouldy bread laced with fear sweat. A motif souring further as it adapts from Pacific brine to the fetid breath of enclosed misery that clings to your nostrils like a persistent fog refusing to lift, leaving you gasping in shallow breaths amid the press of bodies huddled in alleyways where rats scurry bolder than the humans they've outlasted. Your skin crawls with the itch of lice leaping from one ragged coat to another in these walled enclaves forged by Nazi decrees. Each step through crowded streets a negotiation with skeletal figures whose eyes, hollowed by hunger, stare through you like accusations from the grave. And you feel the empathy crush your chest like the weight of barbed wire fences ringing the ghetto, enclosing Jews stripped of rights and dignity in a prelude to erasure, mothers rationing crumbs to children whose bellies swell with malnutrition, while fathers whisper forbidden prayers under breath, their voices a fragile thread against the noose tightening daily, much like how today's online echo chambers isolate communities into digital ghettos where misinformation starves minds of truth, but without the barbed wire's visible barbs to warn of the trap closing shut, leaving souls adrift in invisible cages of hate. The chill slithers back into your marrow despite the summer swelter trapped within these walls, mutating from jungle fever's heat into a clammy dread that beads sweat on your brow as yellow stars sewn onto sleeves brand you like cattle marked for slaughter. The fabric rough against your arm, a constant reminder of dehumanization's stitch. And in this suffocating labyrinth of despair, you overhear rabbis leading clandestine services in basements, lit by stolen candles, their chants a defiant melody against the curfew's silence that falls like a guillotine blade each dusk. Families sharing potato peels scavenged from trash heaps, while disease spreads unchecked through overflowing latrines that reek of human waste piling like unburied shame. Historians still debate whether the Nazis' final solution emerged fully formed from Hitler's venomous manifesto, or evolved piecemeal from opportunistic pogroms and bureaucratic efficiencies that turned murder into memos. But as you witnessed the first roundups where Gestapo trucks idle at curbs like predators in wait, hauling neighbours away under cover of night with rifle butts prodding spines bent from forced labour, you ponder the shocking element of ordinary clerks stamping deportation papers with mechanical indifference. Their ink-stained fingers complicit in a machinery of death that processes lives like factory widgets. A chilling banality that mirrors how today's algorithms flag undesirables in social credit systems without a human flinch, turning exclusion into automated apathy that erases identities with a keystroke. The sarcasm boils in your empty gut how the Nuremberg laws of 1935, stripping Jews of citizenship like peeling skin from a fresh wound, feel like legislating bigotry with a rubber stamp of legality. Worse than banning someone from a club for wearing the wrong shoes only to burn the club down with them inside. But as boycotts shutter shops with smashed windows glinting like jagged teeth in the streetlights, you sense the mood plummet into a resigned terror where children learn to hide stars under coats during schoolyard taunts that escalate to beatings, their laughter silenced by the boot heel of prejudice, grinding innocence into dust. Your pulse thuds erratically in the stifling heat of overcrowded rooms where families stack bunks like human Tetris to fit more souls into less space, heart labouring against the oppression's weight that presses like an invisible ceiling lowering inch by inch. And in that claustrophobic crush, you zoom out for a poetic breath, viewing the ghettos as festering wounds on Europe's body politic, suppurating with the pus of enforced poverty while the world averts its gaze. Letters smuggled out pleading for aid that arrives as whispers too faint to pierce the indifference. A continental scar tissue forming over unhealed gashes from Kristallnacht's shattered glass nights in 1938, where synagogues burn like bonfires of faith and shops are looted under official sanction. The flames reflecting in Aryan eyes glazed with opportunistic glee. The empathy deepens into a soul-wrenching void for the violinists pawning instruments for a sack of potatoes that barely feeds a family for days, their melodies silenced in the din of hunger pangs that orchestrate nightly symphonies of groans. And as deportations accelerate toward the east in cattle cars packed tighter than sardine tins, doors sealed with padlocks that clang like final judgments, you overhear whispers of resettlement that mask the truth of Treblinka's gas chambers disguised as showers, where Zyklon B pellets drop like lethal rain, turning breaths into agonized gasps that fade into silence within minutes. Bodies hauled by Sonderkommando's fellow prisoners coerced into the grim harvest to crematoria belching smoke that darkens skies already heavy with ash from burning dreams. The absurd tidbit emerges amid the horror some ghetto dwellers fashioned hidden radios from crystal sets tuned with cat's whiskers to catch BBC broadcasts of hope, antennas strung from clotheslines like spiderwebs catching forbidden signals, a low-tech rebellion that outwits jamming towers pulsing propaganda, akin to hacking firewalls with analog tricks in our digital dark ages, where censorship algorithms hunt dissent like digital bloodhounds. But without the veil of VPN anonymity to shield the signal source, your skin, pallid from vitamin scarcity that blooms scurvy spots like morbid freckles, itches with the phantom crawl of bedbugs thriving in mattress seams shared by strangers turned kin by circumstance. The chill a persistent undercurrent beneath the ghetto's feverish overcrowding that whispers of Einsatzgruppen massacres in the east, where ravines like Babi Yar swallow thousands in layered graves, bullets economized by shooting children last to fall atop mothers, a calculated cruelty that sears your mind like acid on paper, eroding humanity's facade one layer at a time. The sarcasm cuts sharper now how Himmler's racial hygiene euphemisms sanitize genocide like bleaching a crime scene, worse than rebranding a slaughterhouse as a wellness retreat for livestock. But as Warsaw's uprising flickers in 1943 with smuggled pistols barking from sewers against panzers, you feel the mood ignite into fleeting defiance. Fighters holding blocks for weeks with Molotovs hurled from rooftops like liquid fire from the gods, their barricades of furniture and rubble a testament to unyielding spirit that crumbles under Stuka dives but burns eternal in memory's forge. Your pulse races with the staccato of submachine guns echoing through tunnels where rats flee the flood of resistance blood. Heart swelling with the tragic poetry of Anne Frank's Amsterdam Annex whispers carried on Dutch winds. Her diary, a lighthouse beam, piercing occupation's blackout, words immortalized beyond the Bergen-Belsen barbed wire that claims her frail form in typhus's grip. A voice silenced but echoing louder than any bomb. The metallic tang lingers, now tainted with a coppery flood of uprising spilled vitae that soaks cobblestones like ink on history's page, a motif staining deeper as it bleeds into the narrative's veins, leaving you barricaded in a crumbling tenement, eyes straining through rifle sights at advancing SS silhouettes, mood teetering between heroic blaze and inevitable extinguishment that foreshadows the camp's final horrors unfolding in the east's shadowed valleys. You crouch in the shadowed corner of a Warsaw ghetto apartment, where the thin walls pulse with the muffled sobs of neighbours, separated by nothing but plaster cracked like veins on an old man's hand. Your knees drawn to your chest against the gnawing hunger that twists your gut into knots tighter than the barbed wire encircling this prison of despair. And the air hangs heavy with the stale reek of unwashed bodies packed into spaces meant for half as many. The metallic tang on your tongue now soured further into the acrid bile of fear-laced sweat that beads on your forehead despite the autumn chill seeping through window frames, sealed with rags against the wind's probing fingers, a motif curdling like milk left in the sun as it adapts from the ghetto's enclosed rot to the broader suffocation of occupied Europe, where every breath feels borrowed from a ledger balanced by Gestapo whims that could erase you with a single stamp on a deportation list. Your skin itches incessantly from the lice that leap between shared mattresses like tiny spies reporting every movement to an unseen overseer, each scratch a reminder of dignity stripped away layer by layer in this world where yellow stars sewn onto your coat brand you as less than human, forcing you to avert your eyes from passers-by on the Aryan side who glance with mixtures of pity, indifference, or glee, their footsteps echoing freer than yours, confined to curfew hours that turn nights into eternal vigils, waiting for the dreaded knock that heralds raids sweeping families into vans like autumn leaves caught in a gale. And you feel the empathy hollow out your chest for the French baker in Paris who now kneads dough under watchful Wehrmacht eyes, slipping coded messages into loaves for resistance couriers, while his wife upstairs hides a Jewish child in the attic, her heart pounding with every creak of floorboards that could betray them to collaborators lurking like shadows in cafes once buzzing with carefree chatter. Much like how today's digital dissidents embed secrets in memes to evade censors, but without the anonymity of avatars to shield against midnight arrests that drag you into vans vanishing into fog-shrouded dawns, leaving only empty chairs at family tables as silent witnesses to the vanished. The chill deepens into a psychological frost that numbs your fingertips as you clutch a forged ration card trembling in the queue for watery soup doled out by overseers who skim the best for black market profits. Their smirks a currency more valuable than the worthless zloty in your pocket. And in this daily grind of survival, you overhear whispers of Vichy France's puppet regime, broadcasting collaboration as patriotism from radios tuned low to avoid detection. Pétain's voice crackling like dry leaves underfoot, while de Gaulle's BBC exhortations from London filter through hidden sets, jury-rigged with crystal diodes scavenged from junkyards. A low-tech lifeline that sparks hope amid the blackout's oppressive dark, akin to smuggling USB drives across borders in our era of firewall fortresses, where encrypted files carry forbidden truths past digital watchtowers manned by algorithmic guards. Historians still debate whether life under occupation forged unbreakable bonds of solidarity, or fractured societies into mosaics of betrayal and resilience, where neighbours could be saviours hiding radios in chimneys, or informers trading secrets for extra coal to warm homes echoing with children's suppressed laughter. But as you navigate curfewed streets in Belgium, where bicycles whisper past checkpoints guarded by soldiers whose boredom turns to brutality at the slightest provocation, you ponder the shocking element of underground presses churning out leaflets from basements flooded with the ink stink of duplicated defiance, printers fashioning type from carved potatoes dipped in boot polish to evade raids that smash machines but can't crush the words seeping into minds like rain through cracked roofs. A clandestine craft that outwits censors with vegetable ingenuity, highlighting how oppression breeds creativity in the cracks of control, Much like street artists today tagging firewalls with graffiti that virals before authorities can whitewash the message, the sarcasm simmers in your parched throat as you swallow ersatz coffee brewed from acorns that tastes of defeat. How the Nazis' new order promises prosperity, while rationing everything from butter to hope feels like a diet app locking your fridge and charging premium for air. Worse than subscribing to a service that delivers empty boxes labelled luxury. But in Norway's fjord-carved coasts, you feel the mood teeter between subdued rage and covert action, as fishermen smuggle refugees in hulls reeking of herring to Swedish neutrality. Their boats cutting through icy waters under auroral skies that light the way like divine signals. Hearts buoyed by the quiet heroism of schoolteachers leading classes in barns to preserve language against Quisling's collaborationist edicts that twist education into indoctrination mills, churning out loyalty oaths instead of free thought. Your pulse quickens in the dim glow of a Dutch safe house where Anne Frank's imagined whispers echo from hidden annexes partitioned by bookcases that slide like secrets revealed. Families breathing shallowly to avoid detection, while footsteps thud overhead from oblivious tenants, the air stale with the fear of a cough betraying all, and in that confined vigil, you glimpse the empathy for Roma caravans scattered across Hungary's plains, their wagons burned by Arrow Cross thugs who herd them into cattle cars bound for Auschwitz's moor. Nomads whose songs once filled nights now silenced in the crush of deportation that erases cultures like chalk from a blackboard. A nomadic tragedy that parallels indigenous displacements in colonial echoes still resonating today, where ancestral lands are fenced off for progress without a whisper of consent. The chill settles into a persistent throb that vibrates with the underground's rhythm, where Yugoslav partisans in mountain redoubts ambush convoys with grenades rolled from cliffs like boulders in ancient myths, their faces hardened by Tito's guerrilla gospel that unites Serbs, Croats, and Muslims against a common foe, bonds forged in shared foxholes that outlast the war's divisions, and you ponder the academic uncertainty over whether occupation resistance shortened the conflict by tying down divisions or merely invited reprisals that raised villages in collective punishment, a cycle of vengeance that scorches souls deeper than any flamethrower. Your skin, chafed from coarse blankets shared in communal hides, itches with the phantom crawl of bedbugs thriving in the damp of Parisian cellars, where Maquis fighters plot derailments with dynamite sticks, wrapped in newspaper headlines mocking Vichy's puppets. The absurd tidbit emerging that some resistors fashioned silencers from bicycle pumps stuffed with rags to muffle pistol shots during assassinations. A cyclist tool turned assassin's whisper that hushes collaborationist throats in alley ambushes, highlighting ingenuity's dark bloom in oppression's garden, akin to 3D printing suppressors in garages today, where DIY defies gun laws with plastic precision. The sarcasm cuts through the tension, how the Nazis' racial purity laws forbidding intermarriage feel like a dating app algorithm that swipes left on humanity. Worse than ghosting an entire ethnicity for not matching a twisted profile pic. But as you slip through Norwegian snowdrifts where heavy water sabotage at Vemork thwarts atomic ambitions, heart swelling with the quiet triumph of skiers gliding past patrols on moonlit trails, mood drifting toward the shadowed fronts where Allied infiltrators parachute into the night, eyes straining for the silhouettes of reception committees, flashing torches in Morse code welcomes amid the blackout's velvet cloak. You cling to the edge of a rickety platform in a packed freight car rattling eastward from Warsaw's Umschlagplatz. In 1942, your fingers numb from gripping splintered wood that digs into palms like accusations carved in flesh. The air inside choked with the fetid press of unwashed bodies swaying in unison to the train's relentless clatter over iron rails that sing a dirge of destination unknown, and the metallic tang on your tongue sours into the bile of terror, sweat mingling with the rusty bite of blood from a split lip bitten to stifle sobs amid the whimpers of children clutched in laps that tremble with exhaustion. A motif curdling like venom in veins as it adapts from ghetto's enclosed rot to the mobile horror of deportation's cattle cars, where every jolt feels like a preamble to the abyss waiting at track's end in places whispered like curses Treblinka, Auschwitz, Sobibor names that echo through the slats like wind through graveyard gates. leaving you gasping shallow breath through cloth pressed to your face against the stench of overflowing buckets that slosh with human waste in the corner. A rolling prison where daylight filters in thin stripes illuminating faces etched with resignation. Eyes hollowed by the laws that stripped you of home, job, humanity itself. Much like how today's algorithmic biases quietly segregate digital lives into echo chambers of exclusion, funneling the other into virtual voids without the rattle of chains to announce the cage closing shut, but without the buffer of logout buttons to escape the slow suffocation of systemic erasure. The chill burrows into your core despite the body's heat packed sardine tight, mutating from occupation's psychological frost into a visceral dread that claws at your insides like hunger's twin, pulsing with the frantic heartbeats of strangers turned kin by shared fate, where a young mother opposite you rocks her infant with arms thinned to bone by ghetto rations. Her lullaby a broken melody against the wheel's rhythmic mockery that drowns out prayers muttered in Yiddish, Hebrew, Polish languages targeted for extinction alongside their speakers, and you feel the empathy hollow you out like the starvation that swells bellies while wasting limbs. For the Roma elder beside you, whose caravan tales of open roads now end in these locked boxes hurtling toward gas chambers disguised as showers. Their free spirits caged in a bureaucracy of death that stamps lives expired with chilling efficiency. Historians still debating whether the Wannsee Conference in January 1942 formalized the final solution as a premeditated blueprint or merely streamlined an already accelerating machinery of murder that began with Einsatzgruppen firing squads in the east, where ravines like Babi Yar swallowed 33,000 in 2 days of machine gun staccato that echoed like thunder over Kiev's suburbs. Bullets economized by layering bodies so children fell atop mothers in a grotesque economy of genocide that prefigures the industrial scale of Belzic's carbon monoxide vans and Chelmno's mobile killing units. A progression from bullets to gas that saves ammunition but multiplies the horror in sealed rooms where screams fade into silence within minutes, the air poisoned by Zyklon B crystals vaporizing like deadly snowflakes. Your skin crawls with a phantom itch of tattooed numbers yet to come. Forearms bare but destined for blue-inked brands that reduce names to digits in a ledger of the damned. Each prick of the needle a punctuation in the narrative of dehumanization that started with yellow stars and escalated to striped pajamas in barracks where bunks stack like shelves in a warehouse of suffering. And in this rattling purgatory, you overhear a rabbi reciting Kaddish for the living as much as the dead, his voice a thread of faith against the unraveling fabric of existence, where medical experiments in Block 10 at Auschwitz twist bodies into grotesque parodies under Mengele's scalpel. Twins sewn together or injected with dyes to Aryanize eyes. Their cries a symphony of science perverted into sadism that echoes the Tuskegee horrors in distant America, where ethics dissolve in the pursuit of knowledge stained with blood. A shocking perversion where doctors sworn to heal become architects of agony, fashioning serums from prisoner organs harvested without anesthesia.